Howdy folks! My name is Chance Barnett. I live in Dodge City. Born and bred right here. This is part of Main Street, the way it looks now, in the 21st century. This is a reconstruction of Front Street. We built it to show you what Dodge looked like in the 1800s. There were a lot of lawmen in Dodge City. Wyatt Earp and Bab Masterson, to name just two. My granddad was one of the last of the old-time sheriffs, and I will never forget his stories. Especially the tale of Mr. Bassett. He was one of the owners of the Long Branch Saloon. In 1875, Mr. Bassett was elected the first sheriff of Dodge City. Population 750, plus about 1,000 people drifting in from the trail. This is actually the story of young Chalky Jones, who walked 1,500 miles to get to Dodge.
Hello folks. This is my story. It started in 1875 on dusty Front Street, across the street from the Long Branch Saloon. That's where I took my first steps toward manhood. Times were hard, as were the men. The women? They were even harder. Gunfights were as common as consumption and yielded the same results. Dodge was a brutal town with few soft spots. I was 16 years old and I loved it. I drifted into town like the tumbleweed from a village in California, where life was as slow as a Texas river in July, and music was heard much more than gunfire. My little town was fine and I thought I might have been happy living there, until the first time I heard the roaring sound of the south wind rushing down 2nd Avenue, dashing past Hoover's cigar store, where the smell of gun smoke lingered in the air, after Lute Fowler and Gawk Larkin used their Colts to settle a dispute that started inside Charlie Rath's general store. Larkin didn't even clear leather before Lute blizzed off a hard shot. Rocketed backwards, Gawk fell, and was blowing bloody bubbles with his last breath by the time Sheriff Chalie Bassett rushed out of the Long Branch, beer suds still on his chin, his gun in his hand. Wading into the crowd that had gathered, he scattered those cowpokes as easily as a rodeo bull running through a chicken coop.
Well, Fowler, you finally got Gawk Larkin to draw on you. I'm gonna beat you till there's nothing left to hit.
Oh!
Stop it, Bassett. I've had enough. You can't do nothing to me. It was a fair fight. Charlie Rath saw it, and so did everybody in his store.
You're a rotten liar, Lute. You've been trying to goad Gawk into throwing down on you for months, and everybody in town knows it. You got him liquored up and you forced his hand. Larkin was no gunfighter. He was a bookish man. I ought to make you draw on me right now. Go on, draw. Draw, I said, draw. Draw on me, Fowler. Either that, or I'm gonna beat you to death. Right now, with my fists.
I got my first taste of Mr. Bassett's just as my second day in town. I wandered in from Lone Pine, walking all the way, 1,500 miles, on the White Alkali Trail. After many weeks of struggling along, I staggered down Front Street, more dead than alive, and collapsed in front of the general store. The Alkali Trail had coated me with a half-inch of white dust, and folks immediately started calling me Chalky, and that's the name I've gone by ever since. Mr. Rath gave me some grub and Mr. Grimmick said I could sleep in one of the empty stalls in his stable. But that wasn't good enough for Mr. Bassett. He heard about me and before 9 the next morning, he was at the stable questioning me.
I'm Sheriff Bassett, kid. Where'd you come from?
Well, Sheriff, I came in from California. I lived in a little town called Lone Pine.
I've heard of Lone Pine, kid. It's very far from here. Where's your horse?
I don't have a hoss, Sheriff Bassett. I came here on foot.
Are you telling me that you walked all the way from Lone Pine, California to Dodge City, Kansas?
Yes, sir, I did. Before he died, my pa always said that when the railroad comes to Dodge, the city's going to be smothered in gold, and be the biggest town in the West. First, my ma got the pox and died. Then a month later, my pa got the pox and he died too. I tried to run pa's spread by myself and I was doing pretty good till the men from the bank came.
And what did those bankers want?
They threw me off the land. They held a mortgage. They kicked me out with nothing but the $40 that ma and pa had been saving in a jar in the kitchen. I used that money for food that I ate along the trail, but the money ran out a week ago. Just before I left, I found out there were only 6 more payments due on the property.
Well, Chalky, that's a sad story, but we got a problem. Dodge City has homeless laws. If you don't have a job, no place to stay, and no money, I gotta throw you in jail. Sorry, kid, that's the law.
So, that's how my second night in Dodge City came to being spent in Mr. Bassett's jail. I didn't stay there long. After being served a pretty decent breakfast, that was brought in from the Front Street Cafe, the sheriff told me the only way I could get out of jail was if I had a job. Then, he offered me $35 a month to work for him. I accepted and was immediately put to work swamping out the cells and the outbuildings of the jailhouse and the town hall. Later my duties were expanded to include running errands, fetching the mail, and some clerical work like sifting through the wanted posters, and tacking some of them up in various places around Dodge. Within 3 months the sheriff started training me for law work. A new 6-shooter, and a horse and saddle, were provided for me. Mr. Bassett even started letting me accompany him on his daily rounds. I got room and board at Mrs. Spinney's house for the lawman price of $4 a week.
You've been listening to Chalky Jones tell his tale of how he came to Dodge City. My name is Tom. I was there too. Here's the reason for the bad blood between Gawk Larkin and Lute Fowler. Gawk was a successful farmer with a spread about 5 miles out of Dodge. Fowler was a fast hand with a gun, and a gambler who took occasional jobs for drinking money when his luck was bad. During one such period, he hired on for a few weeks at the Larkin Ranch. He didn't much like Gawk, but he didn't mind Mrs. Larkin at all. Vicky Larkin was a tall and large-framed woman, with long hair, the color of honey from the hive. An ample woman, her assets were clearly displayed whenever she lent a hand with the chores, which was her custom. Fowler cast his eyes on Vicky Larkin with the intensity of a bear getting ready for a feast of spawning salmon. Gawk noticed Fowler's interest in Vicky and the tensions between the two men escalated. As for Vicky, she never gave Lute Fowler any encouragement whatsoever. She was devoted to Gawk. They sweated out the work of the ranch side by side, just like a pair of well-trained draft horses. Vicky was also a very good cook. She'd make beans, biscuits, and bacon seem like a meal prepared back east in the Tremont house in Boston. After Fowler finished plowing the sections he was hired for, he drew his pay and went back to Dodge with an itch that only got worse. He took to bothering Gawk every time the farmer came to town for supplies. He began challenging Gawk. He said, "Hey Larkin, if you don't like it, just reach for that gun you're wearing." The truth is, Gawk Larkin only wore the gun because he needed it to protect his stock from the dozens of wolves and coyotes that prowled the outskirts of Dodge. Gawk was okay at shooting critters, but he had never before fired the gun in the direction of a man. Finally, things came to an ugly head in Charlie Rath's store. There were about 10 customers inside when Lute Fowler started spreading his lies. He said, "I will tell you boys something, when I was plowing the fields for Gawk Larkin, I was also handling Mrs. Larkin's plowing. If you know what I mean." Gawk Larkin's face turned blood red. "Okay Fowler," he shouted, "I am gonna shoot you down like the mad dog you are." The boys in Charlie Rath's general store pleaded with Gawk to not go up against a fast draw artist like Fowler, but Gawk was enraged and he stomped out of the store with Fowler marching right behind. There was a wide, satisfied smile spread all across the gunfighter's face. Less than a minute later, Gawk Larkin fell mortally wounded on dusty Front Street. Mr. Bassett came running out of the Long Branch, beer suds clinging to his chin.
"Oh, you finally got Gawk Larkin to draw on you. Take that!"
You can't do nothing to me. It was a fair fight. Charlie Rath saw it. and at least a dozen cowpoochers and farmers saw it. Gawk Larkin drew on me. I was only defending myself, Sheriff. And that's the law of the West, Bassett, and it is stronger than your law.
You're a rotten liar, Loot. You've been trying to goad Gawk into throwing down on you for months, and everybody in town knows it. You got him liquored up and you forced his hand. Larkin was no gunfighter. He was a bookish man. I ought to make you draw on me right now. Go on, draw. Draw, I said. Draw. Draw on me, Fowler. Either that, or I'm gonna beat you to death. Right now, with my fists.
Chalky Jones and about a half dozen cowpokes pulled the sheriff off Loot Fowler, who was battered, bloody and senseless. Later, back in his office, the sheriff explained his frustration to Chalky.
It was murder, Chalky. Murder. Gawk Larkin didn't stand a chance against Fowler. He didn't have a prayer.
That's true, Mr. Bassett. But the fact is that Gawk had a gun and was going to draw on Loot Fowler.
Just then the door to the sheriff's office opened. It was Larry Durger, the new marshal of Dodge City. The mayor appointed Durger just 1 month after Bassett was named sheriff.
Well, Sheriff Bassett, that was a pretty damn stupid thing you did.
I know that, Larry, I know that, but what was I supposed to do? You know, this wasn't the first time that Fowler killed somebody by forcing him into a gunfight. What am I supposed to do?
Your job, Charlie. Your job. And your job is to keep the peace, not to bust up a man 'cause you can't jail him. You're just lucky that Chalky pulled you off before you did any permanent damage.
Marshal, is Fowler okay?
He's not hurt bad, Chalky. It was blood mostly, but if you had let it go on much longer, you'd have to put Charlie in one of his own cells. You still might have to. Fowler came to me to file a complaint. He left my office muttering that he's going to have you badge Charlie, and he might get it. He's going to see his lawyer Bart Kelton in Hayes City to get Judge Brookish to fire you.
Yeah, I know Kelton. He's a part-time gambler and part-time lawyer and a full-time skunk. Him and Fowler ran a crooked faro game over in Saline County, though neither one ever got charged with anything. But I can't worry about that now. First thing I gotta do is ride over to Gawk's farm and give the sad news to the widow.
I told the sheriff that he didn't have to tell Mrs. Larkin about the shooting. She knew about it. She had come to town for supplies and found out what happened. But the sheriff said he had to go there on some legal matters and to pay his respects. And he said, "I'm taking you with me, Chalky. You're my deputy now." So I went out to the stable to saddle up 2 horses. But while I was doing that, Loot Fowler was pushing his horse towards Hayes City. Still angry at Sheriff Bassett, he was hoping that his pal Kelton could make big trouble for the sheriff. Digging his spurs in hard, he galloped past the little used trail that led to the Larkin Ranch, and headed on towards Hayes City. But then he got to thinking about Vicky Larkin, and he doubled back to the fork in the road. And this time he headed straight for the Larkin Ranch. When he got to the house, he snaked his way to an open window and saw Vicky inside putting some things into a carpet bag. He decided to give her a little going-away present. 10 minutes later, the sheriff and I rode up to the Larkin Ranch. We saw footsteps and drag marks leading from the front door around the side of the house. We followed the footprints, and as soon as we rounded the corner, we saw somebody dragging a lifeless body towards a gulch. Mr. Bassett drew his pistol and shouted, "Drop that weapon, you're under." A few minutes later, Sheriff Bassett and me were in the kitchen of the Larkin house. And Mr. Bassett said,
You want to tell me about it, Vicky? How did it happen?
There's not much to tell. In town, I heard that Fowler gunned down my husband. I came back here and got a gun. Upon learning that Fowler was going to Hayes City, I decided to ambush him along the way. As I was getting ready to leave, he walked through my front door just as bold as ice. With a poker face as cold as January, he said he was sorry for shooting Gawk, and he said it wasn't his fault. Fowler claimed Gawk pushed him into the gunfight. I had my pistol in my carpet bag, so I yanked it out, and blasted him right between the eyes. You know the rest. I was going to drop him into the gulch when you found me.
It's murder, Vicky. I gotta take you in. Now I'm guessing the jury will go easy on you, but you're gonna have to go to trial.
Why do I have to go to trial, Sheriff? My husband had a gun, but he had no chance against Lute Fowler. That was murder, but you didn't arrest him. Fowler had a gun, but he had no chance against me. It sounds like the same situation to me. I don't see any difference.
Sheriff Bassett didn't say anything for a while. He looked up at the ceiling, then he got up from Vicky Larkin's kitchen table and he walked over to a window. He checked the sky and glanced at the cottonwood tree where our horses were munching on grass. Then he came back to the table and sat down. He looked into the blue eyes of Vicky Larkin and smiled. Sheriff Chalie Bassett had come up with an idea.
In a barbarous country like we live in, sometimes lawmen have to make their own rules, Vicky. And the way I see it is, Fowler broke into your house, gun in hand, looking to attack you. And luckily, you had a weapon handy, and you blasted the skunk before he got you. Is that the way it came down?
Yes, Sheriff, as I think about it, that is exactly the way it happened.
And that's just how I'm gonna write it up. Self-defense. Goodbye, Mrs. Larkin. Sorry for your loss.
You've been listening to I Grew Up in Dodge City in 1875, written by Bill Russo, and presented by Short Story Theater. You can listen to more than 100 of our episodes on all podcast sites, or watch many of our tales that have been dramatized for video on YouTube. If you like this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And come back again soon. Won't you?